going to start with a really interesting reading today from chapter 6 in my book. And back in the day, not so long ago, but when I started doing virtual chats, I love to have a virtual bookstore behind me. I've since renovated my office and been able to actually turn my 24-year-old son's room into what feels more like an office space for me, so I don't have to have a virtual background. But it was kind of my anecdote to, I can't go on the book tour, so I'm going to bring the book tour to me, which means I get to be in a bookstore and share a little bit of a reading from my book at the top of every Reinvention virtual chat session. And so I'm going to read from chapter 6, and I'm going to actually mute everybody. Give me one sec, I'll do that. And Robyn, you might need to unmute yourself once I do that. So if you can do that, that'd be great. Yeah, are you unmuted? Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So chapter 6 is called The Courage to Reinvent, Fight the Fear. And actually some pretty amazing people are in this chapter, including Shelley Zalis, including Beth Comstock. So it's a really special chapter, but I zeroed in on this because I thought this would be a really good lead into part of our conversation today. I've had to apply the techniques for reinvention for 30 years in my agency business and have taught the same to everyone who has worked with us. The PR, marketing, and sponsorship business requires a lot of outreach, cold calling, presentations, sales pitches, and creative idea presentations that need to be sold. Each instance requires a mindset that can tolerate rejection. 30 years may have toughened me up, but the old sales adage still gets me through. No means maybe, and I don't think so means there's wiggle room, so go for it. The saying, every no is one step closer to a yes, makes me jump up with delight. When someone tells me they're not interested, I celebrate because it means I can cross that company off the list and move on to someone else who is better suited for the partnership and the client. Sometimes we are hesitant to take a first step towards our dream or goal for fear of failure or rejection by others. We have an idea that others may not agree with or support, and if we believe in it, we should learn to overcome the negativity when others don't get it. Well, who cares? This is your life, not theirs. If they don't dare to dream or go for their goals and create their own greatest life, that's their loss. It's certainly not your concern. Find that one champion, other than that great voice in your head, that's nagging for you to go for it. And that's all you need. My sister Carolyn is that champion for me, ever since I was little, not to mention born on her birthday 2 years later, thus I'm like a real life birthday present. She's been the one to inspire me, show me what perseverance and focus get you, reminds me on the tough days what I'm good at, encourages me to dream and create. She's my biggest supporter and champion, and often my go-to when I need just that little boost. And yes, we all do need that. Many women of my generation were not taught to be persistent when they were growing up. Consequently, they didn't learn how to deal with rejection and forge ahead despite it, in search of the next interaction, meeting, partner, or goal. Some say it has to do with the, quote, dating mating rituals of yesteryear, when women waited for invitations and were not vocal about their needs. We were socialized and educated differently than men, so we require a little more conscious awareness and training to manage and compartmentalize the negative associations of rejection, to overcome them, and to have a voice that is heard. Dealing with fear of rejection comes down to how we frame things in our own minds, as opposed to using society's norms as a benchmark. And when you go in search of rejection or disappointment, your response won't be as negative as it would be if you expect a yes at every turn, because you're expecting it. Toss those no's aside and use them as stepping stones to get to the place you want to be, the place you're meant to be. It's how you choose to frame those moments. Be it an external force or an internal emotion, you will always have control of fear of rejection if you learn to frame your internal and external responses to them. Others' negativity will become a catalyst for your own accomplishments. So I chose to kind of dig into that because in introducing you, Robyn, and we're going to get into a really cool conversation today, I feel like you have worked through some extraordinary history and background. I'm actually going to share your bio in a moment. And I love that the notes that I make in this chapter really speak to our needing to kind of dig into our own fortitude. And you're in the business of helping people, especially now in the coaching business, but looking at everything you've done with your company at FounderForward and everything you've done throughout your career. You've helped a lot of companies and people grow from where they're at, stepping over huge stumbling blocks, just really helping people get in the right frame of mind to build their companies and their businesses. And in all those incarnations, these are realities of what we all deal with kind of every day. And they're quietly there in the background, and a lot of people don't talk about how they feel about that. But I think it's a really important topic. So I think, we can touch on it a little bit today. But I really want to just give a little background and a little context to who Robyn Ward is. And aside from someone that was connected to me, God knows, 10 years ago, maybe, through a great mutual business friend. He said, you two badass women, you need to connect, you need to meet. And we did, and we have, and we've been spending more time talking, and I'm super excited. Robyn is a 20+ year veteran of the technology startup space. In 2017, she launched FounderForward, a leading coaching, training, and development business to help entrepreneurs and executives with leadership development, culture and team building. And FounderForward has worked with many of LA's hottest startups, including STEM, Ritual Automark, Toucan, and Tala. Robyn also co-teaches performance mindset for business at USC and is a sought-after keynote and panelist on topics relating to leadership, peak performance, cultivating and sustaining culture, and emotional intelligence. She has been named a top woman in LA Tech by Digital LA and a top LA Tech ambassador by Tech Week. Prior to FounderForward, Robyn launched and ran the strategic investment arm of UTA. In her role as head of new media ventures, she identified investment opportunities. A few companies we might have heard of, like Patreon and Micmac and Thrive Market, among others, and worked closely with portfolio founders to help accelerate their growth. And before UTA, Robyn was a biz dev and operations exec who served on the early leadership teams of several venture-backed startups, including DocStock and Verified Person. She is passionate about increasing the number of women founders and funders, as well as creating a more diverse and inclusive technology ecosystem. She's a contributor to the book, Changing Tides, Powerful Strategies for Female Founders, and an advisor for Steve Case's Rise of the Rest Fund and the Female Quotient. Robyn also sits on the board of the Women's Founders Network. And there is so much more to you than what I'm reading on paper, and I know that. And I think we're going to get a glimmer of that today. Not to mention has a gorgeous little baby boy that is, maybe sleeping at the moment, hopefully for a little bit, right? So welcome. Thank you. Thanks for being a part of the conversation today.
Thanks for having me.
That's great. So I'm going to come out of the gate with sort of a really big open question. And, you've had this incredible career path. And in my opening reading, I certainly played up the, challenge that women have had, although my book is dealing with men and women and all their stories. But that particular passage that I read, you were in a space and in businesses that I think notoriously have been known for being more men-based. You were probably not the 50-50 women in a room kind of environment, especially in those years that you were there. I'd love you to talk a little bit about what that journey was for you, and then what gave you the courage to kind of step away from it all and to really have not just the courage, but I think the fortitude as well to say, hey, I got this, I get it, and I know who I am. And I think there was probably a lot of that in you. But let's go back a little bit in time and talk about what those rooms were like, especially around tech and media and investments and funding. I mean, wow, you were in the epicenter of a maybe not so easy place.
Yeah, I actually, which I rarely mention, it is on my resume, but I actually started out in investment banking. I used that immediately to hop into tech in the late 90s. So I've been in tech for a long time, but I've been an investment banker, a technologist, operator, and then a venture capitalist. So essentially all of my career, I was the only woman in the room. And so have been an advocate for changing those ratios for a very, very long time. I often played it to my advantage, right? It is the unique and different thing. And so I try to get a lot of the women I work with. I actually coach men and women, but because I have been an advocate, I would say that 65% of my client base is women. I run a women's group called the Grow Group, which has many well-known venture capital-backed founders in LA are part of the group every year. There's a new cohort every year. And so, the idea of playing to my strengths and quelling the imposter syndrome or the inner talk. I mean, I made so many notes, Kathi, when you were reading that lovely chapter and intro, about your sister. And I was thinking, you said, other than yourself. And one of the things that hit me right away, which I coach on often, is, we're often our own biggest obstacle. And the learning really is in the self-talk, right? I get a lot of people that hit me up that want to work on communication, and it's usually with others. And I say, well, we can't work on communication with other until we hit communication with self. And they're usually like, what are you talking about? And I'm
right.
You know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about ants. Ariana Huffington calls it the negative roommate in the back corner of her head.
And shutting her up.
Yes.
Right.
Like when Ariana says, shut up that negative roommate, right? And so, really it's the mental fitness of, how to prep oneself to be in that room. I'm going to go ahead and admit, because we're all works in progress and it's part of what led me to coaching, that I wasn't always great at it. I mean, there were moments where I would get defensive. It's hard when you're getting mansplained, and you're the only woman in the room, and people are taking your ideas and pitching them as their own. So I by no means displayed all of the behaviors that I was always proud of, but it actually led me to get my first coach, and therein led me to an entire change in my life and what I became interested in, which is, for a very long time, I was obsessed with sort of the IQ and the knowing of tactically how to build a business.
Right.
And I sort of had this aha moment with the power of EQ and the power of understanding that all those men in the room, they're not responsible for how I respond, right? And so the learning journey that I went on was to really support myself in my own mind, lean into my strengths, and to really understand my triggers and to manage them such that I wasn't thrown off my game if other people weren't displaying terrific behavior.
Interesting. Was that a hard process? I mean, was that something that took a while to really learn? I think that's a really important point, and I think it applies in so many rooms and so many spaces, is our ability to control how we feel, not necessarily the circumstances around us.
Right. Absolutely. It's ongoing. So when I talk about sort of, emotional fitness and some of these soft skills, and mind you, again, I do coach lots of engineers, right? So I have to bring the data because they don't want to sit and talk about soft skills and EQ.
Right.
So I have to present it in a way that sits for them, but building that emotional fitness, first of all, there's all kinds of research that says it's 2x as important as IQ at certain levels in an organization, right? So there is data behind it. But it is the uncomfortable stuff. And it's also not a destination, it's a journey. I mean, if you really study EQ, which I've kind of gone very deep in, as I knew it was the area I needed to work on the most, right? There's 18 different components of EQ. So nobody's going to have all of those mastered. And so to look at it as, something to tick off would be very much what a type A would tend to do. And to just sort of live in it and know that each day you have to be on top of your mental and emotional management and be present in order to be on top of it each day. Each day you start fresh every morning.
Love that. Thank you. What have been your great reinvention moments in business and personally? And I know that's a pretty wide open question. And I think on the personal side, I know one of the biggies, but coming off what you just said about having gone to this coach, would you say that that was one of the more pivotal moments? I mean, and we all have many reinventions in our lives and they come in all shapes and sizes, but what are the moments that really kind of stand out for you?
Certainly this moment that we are talking about, you know, I had a very large, nice office as you've been to UTA, and you know, I had the liquor rack, the Mad Men, the TV, the couch, the whole thing, and you know, I was writing checks as a woman, which you know was very rare in LA at the time, and I wasn't fulfilled, and I was approaching a bigger birthday, and there were some tragedies that had gone around me, and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't fulfilled.
I was going to ask you that, like, how did you know, like, what was gnawing at you about that?
There were different moments. There was, again, a friend who has a tragedy in her life, had me really sort of just rethinking mine a little bit. And then, you know, the role that I was in became more transactional than relational, and I'm a relationship person, and the piece of it that I was enjoying was becoming less and less of the role, and so that was a big contributor. And I got a coach, and somebody suggested I do this weekend away that I think 5 years before I would have never done. I went up to,
you would have said no,
right? I would have been like, are you nuts? I went up to the Hudson Institute in Santa Barbara, and I did this amazing, intense 4-day Life Forward program. And it, you know, changed the trajectory of my life. And I had always, you know, the reinvention wasn't necessarily an industry thing. I'm a tried and true entrepreneur, lover of innovation. Everything I've done has been around entrepreneurship and tech. It was more of this movement from the operator and the doer and the investor to a teacher and a coach. So the framing of my career has always been different seats around the table, and then just understanding what was right for me at that moment in time. And the choice I made also happened to allow me flexibility that I had not otherwise ever had, to adopt a son, which you had mentioned in the earlier stages. So I've really been able to build a life doing what I believe is the most passionate side of entrepreneurship for me, is like helping people grow into their best self and best leader, through my business FounderForward. But, you know, it also affords me flexibility to, you know, be a single parent. The other thing I will say is, you know, based on the fact that I was getting to spend less and less time just helping the entrepreneurs, more and more time just trying to be in the market so people knew our names so we could get in deals, my days now are 80%, if not more, in flow, which is just doing what I love, what I'm passionate about. I mean, I really suggest lots of people to, you know, actually think about, like, what percentage of your day are you really enjoying yourself and in flow? And what percentage of your day are you grunting and really going, you know, I'm not having a good time? Because when people really think intentionally about it, sometimes those numbers are surprising. And I intentionally decided at this point in my life that I want to design something where I am fulfilled in almost everything I do. And I have been able to do that. I feel very fortunate that I've been able to do that, but I have been able to do that.
But you've deliberately created that. And I think that's so much at the core of, you know, the conversation we have, what the book's about, is feeling entitled to acknowledge that moment and what you're feeling, to hear it, to be aware of what your voices are telling you. And that's why I said, like, you know, what was it that made you feel like this, you know, I'm not happy, this isn't right for me? Because sometimes people don't recognize it. And they'll wake up 10 years later, they're just kind of like, you know, sweep it under the rug. I can't do it. I'm not entitled. I've got to take care of everybody, you know, whatever that is. And we don't allow ourselves the space to recognize that A, we're entitled, and B, we could create it if we actually really want it.
And we have to listen to ourselves. So I will say that, you know, amongst many moments, because there were sort of a bunch of them, I was in Cannes Lion, and I was with Rachel Tipograph of McMahon.
Yeah.
It was an investment I made very early. She's amazing, and their business
Amazing.
is doing
Love
well.
her.
And we were in a cab ride to an event, and she called me coach. And, you know, I was always her first call. You know, we weren't big check writers at UTA, but the entrepreneurs always called me with their crisis first, right? And I loved being that person. And there was something about that moment that sticks in my mind. I always tell Rachel, like when I heard that. But when I started to suss that out and tell people that I was going to do it, it was before coaching was having a moment, right? Like 5 years ago, certainly from being a venture capitalist. Many people that I do love and trust told me that they thought I was nuts and they didn't understand it. And why would I do that? And why would I go into a service business? Right. And so, you know, good thing that becoming a coach has you do your own work, because I knew that I had never felt more aligned.
Yeah.
Right. With my intention and the way I was living both my professional life and my personal life. And I had never felt more fulfilled. So I walked through that and just said, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you giving me your opinion on my life, but this is what I'm doing.
Yeah. So that reading really was very appropriate. I mean, I didn't even realize that, but yes, I think in knowing the journey that you would have been on, and from the conversations that we've had, I think it's such a precious and important thing for people to take away from this conversation, because it is that entitlement. It is about being able to listen. It is about being able to trust in our own voice and really acknowledging what it is that we want and how to pursue what we need to create in our lives. Who do you rely on? Mentors, family, you know, who is it that holds you up when you have those moments of doubt? And they may be people that are going to challenge you. It doesn't mean they all have to agree with you, but they may be the people. Do you have your sort of key people that you know you can still go to, or you do go to on a regular basis?
Yes. More and more, it's amazing people that I have met through this sort of new coaching life.
Okay.
Maybe it's just because they're in the work and they'll
speak a common language
for me, but they'll challenge me. But you know, Anna Barber is one of them. She's the MD of Techstars Los Angeles. She runs the fund LA. We both are community builders and within the same space, but she's also a certified coach. And I feel like we really have each other's back, and we help each other through business ideas. And, you know, she's got 2 teenage sons. So, you know, like last night when he was howling and wouldn't go to sleep, she was helpful.
Oh.
You know, but I definitely believe in the power of the pack, right? So Shelley and the women at the Female Quotient have been amazing. Kara Norton is another one. Yeah. Speaking of, you know, when you were saying generationally, I mean, I literally took so many notes when you read when you're opening. My generation, there's a stat that 93% of women that are just around my age played sports when they were younger. And that was before more women or young girls were playing sports. And that's a phenomenal stat. 93% of sweet women played competitive sports. Right. And so Kara Norton, who's a well-known venture capitalist in LA, also now co-founded the We Are Angel City new women's soccer club. We have a basketball league at Shelley's Alice's house. We obviously didn't do it in 2020, but it's rather amazing. We have women, we drink rosé.
Oh my God, I know. I was like, how did I miss that one?
Right?
Hey, I used to do a mean 3-pointer in 8th grade. Let me tell you.
Okay, well, you're coming. You will love it. And deals get done. Like people are funding companies. People are doing partnerships. The idea for Angel City Soccer Club came together.
Oh my God, love what they're up to.
Wolf pack network of women that I really believe in, and many of us are business women at this same age, and many of us did play sports, which did help us, I think, a little bit with
That
rejection.
voice.
And
Yeah,
team
the voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's an amazing space. And I know that Shelley and the Female Quotient team have been doing these incredible weekly sports, women in sports sessions. I've been tuning into a lot of them. A lot of my friends are in there and just kind of listening in. And it is such an incredible conversation. And I've worked with the World Cup soccer, the Olympics, Super Bowls, the Olympic skating world, you know, so many areas in sports. And we've got clients now very much so in the sports space. And it is such a dynamic, just that relationship between corporate America and even seeing the, you know, those who are in roles of CEOs or executive positions who played sports. And I don't know offhand what that statistic is, but who did play sports and the impact you can sort of see that trajectory and all those things that really contribute to their life skills that come from that. So I think it's pretty amazing. Did you choose to step into this entrepreneurial space and work with companies and executives because you wanted to, I mean, I know you shared sort of your personal journey for having to get out, but you could have gone somewhere else. You could have gone to another company. Mm-hmm. This notion of creating your own business, which is not for the faint of heart necessarily. I mean, I've been doing it for 32 years. And, you know, for some at this point in our lives, we're seeing a lot more people leaving corporate America and starting their own businesses. But was that a big question mark for you at the time? And I ask that because I think a lot of people now, with having lived through the last 7 months, have either been furloughed, let go of businesses, or questioning the certainty of their job security, have given thought to new ideas and ventures and businesses that they want to start up. What was that journey like for you? Was it a no-brainer, or did it take a little, like, should I go to another company or should I just go out on my own?
It's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, I've never been in corporate America. I mean, the companies I was at, I was like the second hire at a startup, which was essentially when you're in there, it's like you're a startup, right? I mean, you're in it so much. So I've only ever been in and around entrepreneurship. So I just was at the stage where, like, here's the thing I want to do, and I can go do that on my own in this bucket. You know, I very much live in, you know, the other thing about the entry reading is, you know, I coach a lot of people on fundraising. There's no bigger no world than entrepreneurship, right? I mean, 9 out of 10 businesses don't exist in 3 years. Right. So the entire construct of entrepreneurship, the entire construct of what most of my coaching is on, is how do you operate at peak performance in peak uncertainty? Right?
Exactly. Right.
So that's the name of the game. And I love that. That's the game I've been playing for 20 something years. I will say, you know, what's interesting for me about 2020, you've had this sort of serendipitous book naming and topic for 2020. In some ways, it's been very interesting for me because, you know, folks talk about this, you know, the VUCA world, if anybody's familiar with that term. It's an MBA term, but it means volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And so this is we are at peak VUCA. 2020 is the most VUCA you can be. Wow. And, you know, my specialty is helping people through uncertain times and working on emotional and mental conditioning, amongst other things. And so there's a lot of the work that I do with entrepreneurs to perform at their best and build high performing companies that actually, you know, just apply to everybody trying to navigate through 2020. Whether that,
I know so many people I need to send you away.
You know, but there's a practice, and I call it best self leadership. And, you know, conceptually there's 4 components, but it's self-care. You know, self-care is essential to manifesting anything in your life. We need to take care of our health and our wellness. And what's interesting, and why that sounds so obvious, is entrepreneurs tend to put everything first, company first, family first, and then they come last. And in point of fact, you are the number 1 asset if you are the entrepreneur. So you actually must put yourself first. And that can be challenging. So how do you operate intentionally, knowing what your mental, emotional, and spiritual needs are, so that you can show up and run a business and be the most creative and optimistic and productive as you can be? And so making sure that you're taking care of yourself. And then it's self-awareness, which goes back to Socrates, know thyself, right? The highest leverage activity you can do to be a leader is to really know thyself and know the authentic place from which you are leading, because that's how you engender trust. And if you have anybody working for you or with you, you have to have trust as a basis for performance together. Then there's self-management, which is a hairy one. It's how you manage your time, attention, and energy. It's how you manage your emotions and your mental. So, mindset and emotions are a big component of dealing with uncertainty and building companies. And then the last one is self-growth. And it's just being extremely directive and intentional about where your company is going, but also what do you need to do to grow yourself, to grow alongside the business. So I work with, a lot of people. And again, this could be anything. You could be growing a community. You could be growing your position within a company if you want a promotion. But being intentional, life is about growth and learning, right? So a lot of people are not intentional about what those next steps of where they want to take themselves are.
Yeah. And there's obviously layers of detail that one needs to dig into in order to just accomplish a lot of that, because those are some really key things that you bring up. If we're not, given that sort of sense of entitlement to do it, but that intention and that roadmap, I find so many people, you said earlier on in the conversation that, you got to a point where you just realized that you weren't doing what you loved. And a lot of people don't. And there's an exercise I talk about in the book where I ask you to really identify what you value in life and where you're spending your time.
Yep.
And 90% of the time, those columns don't align for most people.
Yep.
And so when you can start by really identifying that from the get-go and then start to dig in and do the work on, okay, now I understand where I need to start spending my time to be able to go down that path. And yeah, there are going to be challenges and there's going to be obstacles and you're going to have all those naysayers, let alone the voice in your head that's going to try to stop you from taking on something courageous or adventurous. But I think it's just so critical. And I feel that more and more the work that you're doing as a coach is so essential for people right now to be able to figure out what that action plan is and how to get into those in a deeper level. Because if they're not doing the work, it's all very well. People are reading the book going, oh yeah, that's all great. It was so good. I loved it. The stories were great. The 26 power tools were great. I literally say in my book 3 times, put the book down and go do this exercise. Yep. Like, I'm not kidding. Go put it down. And no author in their right mind is going to tell you to put your book down.
Yep.
But you've got to do that work. And it sounds like there are some incredible steps in what you're sharing. I love this, the best self-leadership steps.
Yeah, so a lot of this again is managing your mindset, your emotions, and your behavior, right? And that's from the limbic system. And so the limbic system does not learn like the prefrontal cortex. So like you can't just read a book and then all of a sudden have alignment, or all of a sudden be a good leader, or all of a sudden change your behavior. All of that change, precisely what you said, comes down to developing practices and habits. And that's why you need to put pen to paper. You need to understand the differences. You need to see them. You need to be intentional. You need to make commitments. You need to calendar. So if there's something you need to get up every morning to do, which is maybe, write some positive mantras that are going to lead you to, being more intentional throughout the day. I love mantras. My big one right now, this is the first year ever I have had ones that are not business related, right? My own personal, we're always growing. And so I have, but one is I release control and embrace the messy beauty of mommyhood. Every morning.
Good for you.
Right?
And to add to that, there's a great phase in mommyhood, which is this too shall pass.
I may add that tomorrow.
Every phase, every stage, you're up for a new one, some other incarnation of it, but whatever you're in. I was visiting my nephew over the weekend from a distance in the driveway, and he was in a bit of a mood. He had just woken up. And I was just cracking up because I was just like, this is so cute. He, he's at an age where he can't express himself yet, but he's old enough to kind of know what he wants. And so it's that in-between stage where they're just a little frustrated sometimes. Yeah. And it's just the cutest thing. I sit here with 21 and 24-year-olds, so I'm way past those days, but I just remember like everything came in stages. So great mantra. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we can do that, and if we don't have little babies at home, we can do that with this very messy COVID, political, insane climate that we're living with.
Oh, I have more. So I also have 2020 is a year for personal, professional, global, societal growth and opportunity. I write it every day so that my mind doesn't get stuck on the fear and the negativity, but moves into the learning and the growth mindset of it all, which is on the other side of discomfort and pain is growth and opportunity. So
it always, the darkest before the dawn, right? Yep. I love that. Let me see, what have we not touched on here? We keep jumping into questions that I had written down. So I just want to make sure the investment community right now, it's an interesting time, and where are they at with seeding new companies versus second round funding for companies, for those entrepreneurs that are out there that are, struggling to understand whether it's viable. Some people are hiding under their blankets going, nobody's going to give me money right now. That may not really be the case. So what's the climate like right now?
Well, something I like to say is good companies will attract money, right? So if you have a good business and you're solving a problem, if you're an entrepreneur that can do a lot with a little, which technically is the definition of entrepreneurship, and can show that there's a little traction or people are interested in purchasing what you're producing or serving, there's a lot of avenues for money. And I will say this is like, it's a hot fall. I mean, fall is the season, hot fundraising season, and it's pretty hot, right? There's a lot of money out there. Yeah. That may change because there was already a lot of money that VC had raised. So you still kind of have it coming in. I think an election and some other things going on could have major impact. But I think, if you're really addressing a pain, or you're offering something really innovative and creative, there are ways to finance it. And I would like to say that venture capital is a very unique type of funding source for high growth businesses. That happens to be like my jam in my world. But I say all the time to entrepreneurs, if you don't need to go that route, and you don't need to have a board, and you don't need to have folks telling you how to run your business, by all means, skip it. And there's a number of ways around that, which are, SBA loans and grants and this often forgotten thing called get to revenue. And I'm not saying any of those are easy.
I love that. Yeah. How about that?
Yeah. How about revenue?
How about that?
A big component.
That reminds me of the moments in Shark Tank. Sorry to interrupt you, but when they're like, "And how have your sales been?" After they've given them this fabulous story, they're like, "Oh no, it's just a concept on a piece of paper."
Right.
And those moments where they're like, wah, wah, like, really, guys?
Yeah. So I mean, the Shark Tank folks are a little old school, and I'm a little old school, right? If it was like one of the new gen shows, I'm sure they wouldn't even talk about it.
Right.
I will say that there was, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, but it might have been the New York Times, and it was like a week ago. And it was an awesomely positive article that was like, more Americans are starting new businesses or have filed to incorporate businesses. Yep. And it just made me joyous. This is how I fell in love with entrepreneurship, is that my grandfather, who I'm named after, so therefore there was always this connection, he was an entrepreneur. He was older brother of two, so there are 3 kids, and they were orphans in New York City. And he had no formal education, and he was a hustler. And he just built businesses and sold it, and he put his 2 younger brothers through school. And when my mom, who was a working mom, would drop me off, he would show me how to trade stocks and talk to me about business when I was like, right?
Brilliant.
And so for me, the fascination came early, which is just how amazing my grandfather's story was, which is a story of many people, including lots of immigrant stories, which
and
is
a lot of you can. You
lot of
just
you
do,
can.
and you can.
A lot
right?
of you and you can, and that's the world I come from. So I just tend to be glass full and optimistic around entrepreneurship. This is why I love being around entrepreneurs. I mean, all day long, people are like, okay, what do you do on a break? I mean, I talk to entrepreneurs. I teach entrepreneurship at USC, like building businesses.
Well, there's nothing more exciting than talking to people who are passionate about what they do.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I totally interrupted you, but.
No,
So,
that's
and wait,
the end of the story is it's a lovely thing, but it's a lovely time all the time to go out and leverage your number one asset, which is you and your mind and your creativity, and to go try to leverage that into the vehicle into which you impact the world.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. And I think, look, if people are willing to stand behind their idea and their vision and do the work, you know, there are those who have ideas and they're not willing to do the work. They just want it to kind of show up on their doorstep. But those who do the work and who really put their heart and soul into it and really work it 24/7, those dreams can become amazing realities. And, you know, there's a lot in that. So you just kind of tipped me off to what your 15-year-old self might have been going through, given your grandfather's life lessons and what you were around. My father and my aunt, I mean, I've been sort of surrounded by entrepreneurs, so I really love that because I grew up with a father who had what I called itchy feet, loved to move around, always an entrepreneur, always building businesses, a very spiritual mother. So I had this incredible yin yang of, there was no box in my world. I lived in different countries. I went to different schools. I've lived in 20 different houses or whatever in my life. And I was very exposed. So for me, there was never this like, oh, I'm going to get out of college and go into a job. So I also saw that at a very early age, kind of that open sense of what's possible. But what would you tell your 15-year-old self? Who were you then? I've got a chapter called Hello, Are You Still in There? Do you see shades of your 15-year-old self still? And with all the wisdom that you've acquired and that you will now pass on to your son, you know, what would you have told yourself then, who maybe was a little more wide-eyed than others?
I love this question. And there's probably a lot of different things that I would tell myself. Certainly my 15-year-old self, just as my 3-year-old self is still in there, which is part of the work that we do.
That's a good thing, no?
What?
That's a good thing, no?
Right. But I mean, there's learning and there's unlearning, right?
Yeah, true.
And so some of those things you take forward and some of those things, hopefully we're conscious enough.
Like what? Don't lie on the floor and have a temper tantrum? Get up and deal with it? Or do that, but then get up and deal with it.
More. But, you know, for me, I did have I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I did have this view that, you know, the world was like climbing a mountain or climbing a ladder. And I really do believe that, you know, the metaphor that it's more like a jungle gym, right? Even though I knew I was in entrepreneurship, the companies I was at or the things I chose to do, I really do believe that they all ended up in this particular thing I'm doing now, being my life's calling. And I have found the thing. But there was a long time. I mean, I was valedictorian of my high school. I was very, right. I was magna cum laude, like this thing. Right. And I would definitely, you know, say, you know, loosen up and understand that, you know, life has many chapters and that you're certainly not going to have it all planned out at 15. You're never going to have it all planned out, quite frankly. So that would probably be the advice that I think would have been most important for me to hear.
Right. But you took a lot of the right steps to do things that would position you to harness, you know, a lot of the wisdom that you acquired along the way too.
Yeah. I mean, I did take risks in that. I mean, I ended up challenging that a lot. Certainly, you know, when I did leave banking, which was my jumping into tech, I mean, everyone thought I was nuts then too. Like, why was I going to leave a high paid banking job? Because back then there was no like whole startup rock star thing, right?
Right.
So it's like, why are you going to jump to this thing and have it be a failure?
Right.
And then
Exactly.
the first business was in 2000. So I was in the first internet bubble, and we were at a company that raised a ton of money and then went down in flames. And I had never failed at anything before. So, you know, my favorite quote is, entrepreneurship is a personal growth engine disguised as a business pursuit. And so everybody actually is thinking about the business they're building. But if we're really thinking about the game of life, it's just about growth and learning. So there is no failure and loss as long as you feel like you're progressing and learning. But I would say that the journey of me kind of inner fighting the perfectionist overachiever and
Right.
the person that wants to take risks and have an adventure and not do the standard thing has, you know, been an internal mental battle. But I think I've lived pretty true to the entrepreneurial side.
Oh, it sounds like you are so living your North Star right now, Robyn. It's amazing. It gives me goosebumps because I love seeing people find that place in their life and being in such a good space with it. You know,
this is why it's important for people to write a book that might get somebody just a little fire, right, with some tools, as you have in your book, to get going, because you can stay in the discomfort and the unhappy or the fear, but you do not know what's on the other side of just taking that first step and going for it.
Exactly. I mean, as you know, in the title of my book, a very important line here, what are you waiting for? I mean, that, you know, try. There is no such thing as failure. It's all part of the process, the journey, the education. You know, we've seen friends who have like gone off and left huge corporate jobs and tried some new venture and they didn't love the venture and they came back to what they were doing or some different version of it. But to know that you checked it out, you tried, you conquered it, you learned from it, you grew from it, is an amazing feeling. So on that note, and my last official question, what is on your bucket list? What's on your reinvention list? Personally, professionally? Anything that you're sort of setting your sights on that, you know, could be in the immediate future or the far future?
Well, the first thing that popped in my mind, so I'll share, is I just made, you know, a very large decision in the last year to adopt a son. I, for a long time, was a very career-focused woman, and I traveled the world and I kind of did what I wanted when I wanted, which was lovely. And now I've chosen a different path. I am most excited to travel with my son to many of the places that I've been that were important to me, but to continue to travel to the places that I haven't been. Much of his room is in a travel decor. To me, traveling is the ultimate learning experience, which is what I love about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
You know, professionally, I'm working on a bunch of new initiatives. Right now, the most immediate thing that's exciting is I mentioned this women's group that I select a cohort for every year. I just opened up applications. So it's not for people just with an idea, it's for people that have something going, because it's a leadership accelerator. But every year when I'm picking the next group, I love it because I'm doing what we said, which is talking to amazing, passionate entrepreneurs. This happens to be a women's group. I'm noodling on a book, something that you've done, which I've spoken to you about.
Yeah.
And, you know, just really expanding my business. I've created a lot of content that I'm really passionate about, working on some specific content around emotional intelligence for entrepreneurs. So, you know, my big growth this year was to be patient with myself on my business growth, because I've added this much more robust and joyful dimension to my life.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get back full steam ahead, you know, next year. So I'm just going to allow myself.
You need to allow that. Exactly. Yeah. And I have to say, as someone who's run a business for 32 years and raised two children who are now 21 and 24, I used to have to remind myself frequently, because I'm never thought of myself as a type A person, but I think I'm starting to resolve that maybe I just have a bit of it in me. that at the end of the day, if I knew that I could have dinner with my kids, pick them up from school, that I had the right to do this. And I created my own company for a reason, so that I could have the freedom to do this. And the only person that was sometimes stopping me from allowing myself to do what I needed to do on the personal side was myself. Because if you set the parameters and the boundaries with clients and colleagues and other people in your life, and you have the freedom to do that when you run your own business, then it's really on you to set those boundaries.
Well, boundaries are a big part of what I coach on. It's probably a big part in your book. And for me, the learning experience this year has been choosing a more robust life, and then understanding how that blends, because I do not use the word balance.
No,
that implies that there's some sort of
there is no such thing,
right? Does not exist, but that is my personal growth journey this year. And people, ask me, because I've always got such big plans and I'm talking about what I'm doing next, and when people ask me, I think they really enjoy my new response, right? I kind of go, that's not Robyn in 2020. I'm actually got another priority, and I have some ideas, and it's not that I haven't been working on them, but those aren't my core priorities this year.
I love that. Gosh, we're so late in the hour, and I don't know if anybody I'd love to open this up. If anybody's got any questions, if you want to put them in the chat, if you want to raise your hand, take your mic off mute. This is such a beautiful conversation. And Robyn, I've put your website in the chat session if anybody wants to pick that up.
Someone mentioned something about the group. If you go to my website, you'll find Grow Group, and then you literally apply. It'll ask you to tell me about your business, and there's a process.
Okay, perfect. And so it's for those listening that may not be seeing the chat, it's FounderForward.com.
Right. Yes.
And you can always check in with me if you don't have that, or you'd like it, or you want to follow up with it, because we would be thrilled to share Robyn with you. There's so much in this, and so much amazing business advice. We have a tab on the website called Get Inspired, and I would love to add you to that tab and your website so people know how to reach you. And I'm such a curator of content and stories and amazing people and connecting everyone, which is what's so fun about the virtual chat sessions. So I'd love to include you. So we're going to follow up with you and get a little paragraph that we can include and put your link in there as well, so people know how to find what you're up to. This has been such an incredible conversation, and I just love your perspective. I'm so excited for you to be where you are in your life right now. And the fact that you're even doing the work you're doing as a coach from a place that you're in, where you're really living it. You are truly living that true north for you. And that, to me, is just the thing that makes me so joyful in other people. I'm always looking to just inspire people and remind them that they can.
Yeah.
And it's just really special. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me and doing what you're doing, and your book and all the things.
It's a pleasure.